Hello everyone and welcome to episode 7 of For Those About to Pod, We Salute You, the classic rock podcast. In this episode we look back at 1992 in my year in rock. We look at the latest rock news, gig memories and hidden gems. If you like what you hear, check us out at Facebook or on Twitter at @4_salute. So without further ado, here's my podcast partner, Mr. Brian Maley. How you doing, Brian?
I'm good, Matt. How are you, mate?
I'm okay, thank you. Nice to see your smiling face, as always.
And yours as well, too.
So, what has caught your eye, Brian? That's a catchphrase that I was trying to launch last time. I'm not sure how it's going, but we'll see how it goes.
What's caught your eye, Brian?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, we're kicking into 2021, so lots of new releases from our dear friends in Frontier Records. 2 albums have come out, not this week, but the back end of last week, which will interest some of our listeners. I'll kick off with the first album, which is from a band called Wet. So for our Swedish podcast listeners, as which we have some, so thanks for our Swedish listeners. So Wet is it's a Frontiers Records project band. It comprises of 3 main players from bands called Work of Art. So that's Robert Saul, Eric Martinson from Eclipse, and Jeff Scott Soto, Matt, that you and I both know, who was the singer in Talisman. But obviously, Jeff was in the Yngwie J. Malmsteen. Let's not forget the J.
Don't forget the J.
Don't forget the J. And he was in Journey as well too. So
Sons of Apollo.
Yeah.
Sons of Apollo, Journey, Soto the band.
Yes.
Yeah,
You've
good
seen
singer,
him,
isn't he? I like him.
Yeah.
I have. He's great. I like him.
He's
He's a big lad. It always reminds me of like an American. He's a big fella. And he always reminds me a little bit of an American Nathan James, or the other way around.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, he is. You're right. He's a powerful bloke. So they've been going since 2008. So it's their 4th album, which has come out. It's called Retransmission. All I would say is 11 tracks, really well produced album. I had a good listen to it over the weekend. I love it. It's a great album, and it's not all about Jeff singing. The other guys who are from, Eclipse. I know you've listened to some of the Eclipse stuff.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah.
Really strong album. I was really impressed with what I heard. So hopefully people can go and listen to that and let us know what they think. Another album which dropped last week was the new album from our friends, the Dead Daisies.
Ah, yes.
Yes. So
fronted by your man, Mr. Glenn Hughes, of course.
Mr. Glenn Hughes. So I can remember when the single came out, Righteous Days. So the album Holy Ground was released a few days ago. I've had a listen. I'm a bit of a Glenn fan, as you know. So it sounds like good rockin' Glenn. He's in good voice. The band, obviously we've talked about the Dead Daisies before. It's pretty much financed and managed through David Lowy, but Doug Aldridge is on it. He's playing seriously great guitar, and Dean Castronova is on it playing drums, who's a phenomenal drummer, great singer as well. I've had a listen to the Holy Ground album. It's great. It's Glenn. Oh, right. I can't believe Glenn must be 90.
I think he is, at least, if not older. Yeah,
and he's singing really good.
He is, isn't he? He's one of those rare characters that has got not quite better with age, but he's kept the same standard. And it's not always the case, and that's no fault of the singers themselves, because as you get older, your vocal cords thicken up, and the ability to hear high notes, it's a condition, isn't it, of sorts.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's quite something, Glenn Hughes. He seems ageless as well. I imagine he's in his 60s now, maybe slightly older, but he seems to not age. Well, maybe he's got some sort of fountain of youth in his California retreat.
He is. He's actually 69. Glenn's 69.
Okay.
Yeah, born in 1951. Right. So he's 70 this year.
Wow. Okay. We talked about them before, Dead Daisies. They again, when we get gigs back again one day, if they tour in this country, they are well worth checking out because they're, as you said, got some great players, great musicianship, good songs. So that's good. Well, thanks.
Yeah. So that's my something just actually hot off the press, which was announced literally just before I came onto the show, and it's worthwhile shouting out to everybody, is we talked before Christmas time about a great single that had come out from Smith and Kotzen. So Adrian Smith, our secret weapon of Iron Maiden, and Richie Kotzen, who's in the Winery Dogs and was in Mr. Big. So they've actually just announced that they have an album coming out on the 26th of March this year. So I was just expecting it to be a single, bit of a one-off little project, but the album is out March this year. So I'm really looking forward to that. I love Richie Kotzen and I love Adrian Smith, and I think it'll just be melodic rock. Marriage in heaven. So that's my news, mate. What's kept
my eye?
Yeah, what's caught your eye in the news?
In the news, well, it was quite an interesting week last week. There's a tribute band in London who were sent cease and desist note from Pearl Jam. So this is a tribute band based in London, and they're also called Pearl Jam, but with an extra M at the end of jam. And they were told to change their name because it was detracting from Pearl Jam's image, and there were being mistaken identities. And I have to say, I'm one of those people. I've seen them, they're advertised, and in I don't know, the Garage in Highbury or the Islington Academy or something like that. And I thought, wow, Pearl Jam have fallen on hard times. One day we're talking about them playing Hyde Park, and now they're playing the Garage no disrespect to the Garage in Finsbury Park. Nice little venue. But anyway, so it's a different band altogether. And they've been told to change their name. And I was thinking about it, actually. I was thinking, I can kind of see both sides of the argument in a sense. There are lots of tribute bands out there, and generally their names are similar, but not the same, with a different letter added as the band they're tributing. And there's some very inventive, of course, tribute band names, and some good ones. But they generally, you can get a sense from the name as to who they are: the Bootleg Beatles, Counterfeit Stones, the Illegal Eagles, Dirty DC, and so on. So I thought it was a strange one. That even made, I live in the London area, as you know, and that even made the London BBC News.
Did it really?
May have been a slow news day. It did, and they even interviewed the guys from the band, not Pearl Jam, i.e. Eddie Vedder and Mike McCready, but the guys from the tribute band. So it just shows you, if you're gonna form a tribute band, boys and girls, choose a name which is close but not the same as the band you're tributing. Where do you stand on tribute? Where do you stand on tribute bands, Brian?
Where do I stand in tribute bands? I like a tribute band where, say you've got something like the Kiss, so the Kiss tribute band, which is Dressed to Kill. Dressed to Kill. It's where they do the whole show. And you're getting your value money, because when you think about it, you go and see a Kiss show, you're paying big bucks, and they're only playing in the big arenas. So I think tribute acts are good because it means it's keeping the music alive, particularly for bands who might not be touring that much. I also like it where if you've got something like there's a few AC/DC tribute bands, and it's nice where AC/DC go out and. Ironically, it was only really when Axl Rose was fronting AC/DC that you got the Bon Scott catalogue. And there's some AC/DC tribute bands where they'll either have two singers or where you're covering off the Brian Johnson era and the Bon Scott era. So I'm okay with tribute bands. I'm a little bit on the side of Pearl Jam because it's so close to the name of the original band, and I think that's where the Dressed to Kill guys came out and sort of, went, I can understand Pearl Jam's position where that's really close. It's only one letter difference. I remember in my there's a little municipal hall in a little village in Scotland called Lanark, and there was I'm not going to name for fear of falling out with whatever app that was on my phone where I'm able to track which artists I like, and it says here's a gig, but ELO ELO were playing the Lanark Hall, but it comes out with like ELO's, it shows you ELO's itinerary of like Hyde Park, Wembley Stadium, Lanark Hall. So, I love Europe, the band. I think Europe again were playing in that club, and I was like going, sorry. When are Europe playing? I'm okay with tribute acts, and we've talked about Ripper Owens and Judas Priest, and some great things come out of tribute bands. If they're doing it and they're doing it well, then more power to them.
No, I agree. Yeah, I've seen quite a few, and I do enjoy, as you say, sometimes, you get to see, a really good interpretation of the original band. So, yeah, long may they continue. The other thing, which is not quite news, but just to mention, I just finished reading Rob Halford's autobiography.
Yeah.
And I'm only bringing this up because some people might be interested. Judas Priest's singer, of course, Rob Halford. His book is called Confess. It came out at the end of last year. And it's a really interesting read. And I do like a rock autobiography, as you know, Brian.
Yep, that's right.
From anything from Ozzy / Tony Iommi, Pete Way, KK Downing. And recently I finished off the Rob Halford book in a relatively short space of time. My wife was very surprised that I'd even, finished it in, as I say, a week. Good read, well written, and a very interesting kind of insight into the world of Rob Halford, singer of Judas Priest, and also solo artist. So yeah, that would be a recommendation. People are listening and they're stuck for something to read during the lockdown months. Well worth checking out.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I know I'm not through it. I'm reading it as well. I'm not as far. I haven't finished it yet, but it's an easy read, and it's about Rob, the guy, as well as Rob, the metal god, and it's a nice easy read. The pages turn really, really quickly, and it's I enjoy.
Unless you're reading on a Kindle, of course, and then it's like you have to, swipe.
Okay.
And you like the pictures as well, don't you? Like looking at the pictures.
I'm terrible. I'm this with me with books. I'll go to the section of the book where I'm going. Obviously, Rob fronted Black Sabbath for 2 nights when in 1992.
Oh,
right. Funny. We should mention that.
Funnily enough,
So he fronted Sabbath because Ronnie wasn't going to do the. Ronnie didn't do the shows, which was Ozzy's farewell shows with Black Sabbath and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of going, I want to read that bit, and you go to that bit. So I'm terrible. I did that with Glenn Hughes's book whenever Glenn's book came out, and I went, I've got to go straight to the Glenn Hughes. When Glenn Hughes was in Hughes and Thrall, then I had to go to when Glenn was in Black Sabbath and he knackered his nose and couldn't sing, and then I went to Glenn Hughes when he was in Gary Moore. So I read Glenn Hughes's book based on what I'd read in Kerrang all those years ago. And then decided, this is a really good book, I'll go and read it from the start again. So I read a book twice to finish it.
Oh, that's interesting. The only objection I have with any sort of autobiography is they always start with, so I was born at a very young age and I went to school and so on and so forth. And I think, well, you all went to school, most of us anyway.
Yeah.
And so on. I wish they just fast forward to like the point when they kind of got into music and they became into band and all that.
Yeah.
Because it's always the same formula. That is my only criticism. Okay. But I am a sucker for a good rock autobiography. Right. Talking of 1992, Brian, funnily enough, I should mention that. So last time when we spoke, which was a few weeks ago now, our first podcast of 2021, I gave you the challenge, which of course you accepted, to talk about the year 1992 and what music you were listening to, what albums you were buying, what gigs you were going to, etc. Now, as is always the case, you always ask me how old I was in 1992, but for a change, I turned 27 in 1992.
Okay,
I think. Was it 22? I'll get back to you on that. How old were you in 1992?
In 1992, Matthew, I was 23.
Okay, I must have been 27. Tell us about 1992. Where were you living in those days?
In 1992, I was in the northeast of England. I was living in...
Okay.
Yeah, I was... in fact, I was at uni. I was at uni in 1992. Yeah, I was still at uni in 1992.
Wow. Did you fail a few years? You must have been quite old to be at university.
No, I did a year. My university course was 4 years, so I did a year's placement. And yeah, so it was my final year. It was my final year of uni. So I was still in the northeast of England. And interestingly, 1992, it was a year of big tours. So that was the Use Your Illusion tour was happening in I think the Use Your Illusion tour started probably about 1990 and finished in 1997. But yeah, but it's like, it went on forever and ever. But I got to see. I was so pleased in '92. I got to see Guns N' Roses. I got to see that package, which was Guns N' Roses, Faith No More, and Soundgarden in '92. Wow. That was really that was. I didn't know Soundgarden that well. My friend Keith turned me on to Soundgarden. They really sounded very Sabbathy in the Bad Motorfinger era. So they sounded great. Faith No More were just off the scale. They were unbelievable. And then Guns N' Roses came on, and they were going to Guns N' Roses. Matt Sorum was in the band, so you didn't have the Appetite band, and you had the two keyboard players and the backing singers and all that kind of stuff. So no, that was good. So 1992, I got to see, that was probably the highlight gig for me in 92. But so 92 was an interesting year gigs wise, and when I go through, you've picked some eclectic albums in some of your years, and when I was going through my collection of my top 5 albums, it was an interesting year in rock. Grunge was starting to kick in. Nevermind went number 1 in January of 92. Pearl Jam was big in 92 on the back of 10. So top 5 albums of 92 as far as Brian is concerned. First album up for me, Dream Theater, Images and Words. It was their second album, got a lot of coverage on MTV with the single Pull Me Under. Just a brilliant album. That got me into Dream Theater, and I've followed them ever since. James LeBray, who's the singer, had just joined the band, sang really, really well. So first album, Matt, Dream Theater, Images and Words, easy peasy, bought it in 92, great album.
That's good. It's a good choice. Good choice. Was Mike Portnoy in the band in those days?
He was indeed.
We mentioned him a few times, haven't we?
Yeah, Mike.
And they were about. Was that their first album?
Second album.
Because weren't they famously a bunch of guys who met at the New York School of Music? I think
Berkeley. They were
like
at Berkeley. They met at Berkeley.
Oh, that was it. Yeah. And I suppose that's a good place to form a band, isn't it? A college of music.
Yes.
Good band. And we've seen them a couple of times, of course, over the years. Cool. Like it. Good start, my friend.
Good start. And we'll hit everybody with the comeback. I thought this was a great comeback album from this next band who I loved. Bon Jovi, Keep the Faith. Great album. Dry County is probably... Keep the Faith, the single, which is great. I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. Really, really strong album to come back. Obviously, they did the tour on the back of Slippery When Wet and New Jersey. Took a little bit of time off. Richie did a solo album. John did he did some producing for Hall & Oates and Stevie Nicks. And then he obviously did the Young Guns. It was such a great album when it came back, and to me, I don't mind saying it, I think it's the last great Bon Jovi album. Just great songwriting. You know, those 3 albums, Slippery, New Jersey, and Keep the Faith. So a great album. And I got to see them as well too, you know, around that time, and singing great. Richie, a great guitar player. So that was number 2.
Good choice.
Yeah.
I agree with you about it being probably the last. As you were saying it, I did think, was kind of thinking beyond that. You know, they haven't really. I mean, they've had plenty of albums, and they're still hugely successful, of course. But
yeah,
I would tend to agree with you. That was their last. That was probably those 3 albums back to back.
Yeah,
Slippery, New Jersey, and then Keep the Faith. Because that was, as you said, it was kind of a comeback album of itself, wasn't it? Because didn't John Bon Jovi, he cut his hair short, and they kind of almost burnt themselves out on the New Jersey tour. And I remember John Bon Jovi coming back with a nice kind of shortish sort of styled hair, and it was like there was uproar. What's he cut his hair for? What's going on?
Yeah.
But the music did the talking, of course, and it's a good album.
I would recommend to anybody, and I don't think it's on. It'll be on YouTube if you want to see Bon Jovi at their fighting fittest as a band. They actually released it's not even out in DVD. It's an evening with. It was recorded for MTV Unplugged, but they kind of did it plugged.
I remember.
And they opened up with a little help from my friends, and they do some cover versions, and it's just them sitting in the round in a studio, and they are I'm just surprised they never released it as a live album, Matt, because they do covers like Fever, We Gotta Get Out of This Place by the Animals, Louie Louie, and then they're chucking in Wanted Dead or Alive, and then there's a bit chat with the band. Bon Jovi, An Evening With, it's definitely on YouTube. Check out that, because in '92, Bon Jovi came back with a strong album and they toured well. So that's I probably should have put that last as my top album.
Do you think you picked too soon?
Well, we shall see. I'll let you be the judge of that. Album 3.
I doubt it.
Album 3, a great album on the back. This is a 3rd release from my favorite band from Boston. You might like Aerosmith a bit more. Extreme, 3 sides to every story. On the back of Porn and Graffiti, and they toured that to death, and you had the big singles. That album is just, it's sublime. It's just a band. The production, the singing, the songwriting, it obviously probably doesn't get the light shone on it as much as Porno Graffiti, but
it's true.
I would check it out. The last song, which is the segue of, it's got Rise Today. It probably lasts about 11 minutes, but it's as Queen as they're ever going to get. Brilliant album. I love 3 sides to every story, so go check it out.
Yeah, it's good. I agree. I bought that at the same time as well, actually, funny enough, back in 1992 when I was living in Stevenage, by the way. Thanks for asking. I do remember playing it in my bedroom in Stevenage. Yeah, good choice. Yeah, great choice.
Yeah.
And as you say, maybe it's not quite a hidden gem, but you're right. It kind of gets overlooked by Porn and Graffiti 2, and all their kind of, their hits, as it were. The More Than Words is of this world and so on. But yeah, some top songs on that album, aren't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good choice. Good choice.
No, we've seen them at Ramblin' Man, and there was probably a lot of chat around could Extreme handle a headlining slot at a premier festival, and I thought I did a great job. So
yeah, they are great. Like they are great. They are really good live. I mean, again, one of those bands that if they do come back, when gigs start again, if you get a chance to see Extreme, they are great. I mean, they all sing, great musicianship, and always something going on. Great choice.
Yeah. Album 4. Which might be in a few people's record collections. I'd be really interested if you've got this one. This is the well-titled LA Blues Authority Volume 2, Sir Glenn Hughes. So it's a blues album. So this was Glenn's This is Glenn's solo album. It's Mike Varney, who ran Shrapnel Records in the sort of 80s and 90s. He was well renowned for discovering all of the shred metal guitarists like Paul Gilbert and Richie Kotzen and all these guys. Glenn in 92, he hadn't released a solo album since 1977 with Play Me Out, and so this is his first solo album. So it's a real blues album. The opening track, if hopefully it's on Spotify, I'll check. I'll put this track on it. But the opening track is called "The Boy Can Sing the Blues," and Glenn is wailing on that. And the good thing about it is, if you're a guitar fan, as I am, there's loads of guest guitar players on it. So John Norum from Europe, who played a lot with Glenn in the 80s and 90s. But people like Mick Mars. So Mick Mars from Motley Crue is playing lead guitar. Warren DeMartini from Rat, who's a brilliant blues player. He was in Whitesnake for a little while. Warren's in it. Richie Kotzen, Mark Kendall from Great White. So it's a lot of like 90s, late 80s, 90s guitar players that feature in the album. And it's a really strong album. So I thought I got Glenn kicking back in, and then he moved on from 92, and then his solo career kicked off from there, from that album. So it's called LA Blues Authority Volume 2. Check it out. It's really, really good. And my final album is from that great British band Thunder. Thunder's second album, which was released, which was Laughing on Judgment Day. It just is a great follow-up to Backstreet Symphony. The songwriting was so much more mature. I've said this to you before, Matt. I actually prefer it to Backstreet Symphony, but as a work of a band that's firing on all cylinders, 1982, Thunder were ready to move into proper headlining. So the last album for me would have been Thunder's Laughing on Judgment Day, and there was lots of other albums I could have picked out for 92, but those are my top 5. What about you, mate?
Very good, very good. Well, you've made great choices, as always. I've got a couple of albums that I remember buying at the time, which is our normal criteria for reviewing those years. The first one is an obvious one, and I think we talked about this band on all of our shows so far. We've certainly talked about the guitarist that joined this band back in 1992 on all of our shows, because this is a new feature called "What Was Sir Viv Doing Then?" And so in 1992, I remember buying Adrenalize by Def Leppard, which is again, it's one of those albums that it's great tracks on it. It was the first album they'd done after Hysteria, the first album they'd done after Steve Clark had died, and the first album that I don't think Vivian Campbell actually played on it.
No, it's all Phil. Phil Collins does all the guitar. Yeah,
that's right. So, but I thought, well, I can't not put that in. I've done it. We've done it between us in the last few podcasts. We've mentioned pretty much Def Leppard all the time. They coincided with the years that we've been talking about. But Adrenalize in 92, got some great tunes on it. Let's Get Rocked, of course, was the big single. Yeah. But I mean, there's a song on it which I think is dedicated to Steve Clark called White Lightning. Yeah. Absolutely amazing song. So, Adrenalize by Def Leppard. And then the other album, which I remember buying at the time, is a slight departure from the normal rock albums that we talk about, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, is Little Earthquakes by Tori Amos. Now, Tori Amos...
Ooh.
Yeah, you're right with that?
Good choice. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you. Tori Amos is probably one of her most well-known albums, and a couple of her hit singles are on there, Crucify and Silent All These Years. And it's just some good songs, well produced, and just something different. I think a good song is a good song. If you like it, then it doesn't matter what genre it's in. And I remember buying Little Earthquakes then, and one of those albums that I still go back to every now and again, if I want a bit of kind of, something a bit cool and relaxed. And I would suggest Little Earthquakes by Tori Amos.
That's a good shout.
So, yeah, if you could put...
What track would you want me to put on the Spotify playlist?
let me think. I would probably go with Crucify, please, if you don't mind. But 1992 was an interesting year in music, as we've kind of touched upon. Several things happened which were quite interesting. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert happened in that year. Yeah. I'd forgotten about that. And, that was obviously a, sad event in one respect, because it was a tribute to the recently departed Freddie Mercury. But, as an event, it was huge. And it was kind of almost rivaled Live Aid. That took place in 1992. Do you remember watching that, Brian? I didn't go, but I did watch it on TV from almost start to finish.
It was kind of split in half, because obviously you had all of the acts who were invited. So Metallica, Guns N' Roses played, Extreme played, Def Leppard played. Actually, it was Vivian's first gig with.
It
was Vivian's first gig with Def Leppard. So I enjoyed it. There was a few acts where you were surprised. So I remember, obviously George Michael killed it on Somebody to Love, and they also did 39, which is a track on Night of the Opera, which Brian May famously wanted as a single, and it never came out. Didn't think it got released as a single, which is a great song. Lisa Stansfield sang. Bowie and Annie Lennox did Under Pressure. Mm-hmm. But there was some songs by artists where you just went, Freddie Mercury was such an amazing vocalist. I love Seal. I don't mind saying it. Seal did Who Wants to Live Forever, which is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. And he just, sometimes a voice doesn't match a song. And for me, Seal put his heart and soul into it. Paul Young did Radio Gaga. It just didn't work for me. There was some things I walked away from the concert, or walked away from watching that, going, what a tribute to Freddie, that it took so many artists to sing his repertoire of songs, from Robert Plant to Liza Minnelli to Zucchero, and Freddie just could do it all.
I tend to agree with you, but it was a big event, and it was a great event as well. And the other thing, which music related in 1992, we've got our friend Matt Graydon to thank for this, because he reminded us today. Yes, Wayne's World came out in 1992, of course. And we did touch upon that in the context a few weeks ago of one of those reunion things. Yeah. And as I said at the time, I was one of those sad people who was doing the catchphrases. I still do them, actually, now and again. Which I think is excellent. I just thought I mentioned that because there was a good soundtrack to that. If you remember,
I don't actually. No, it's a soundtrack. I don't have that in the arsenal. What's on it?
Well,
as long as Dreamweaver's on it.
Dreamweaver, of course, is on it. And of course, Ballroom Blitz was given a new lease of life as a result of that, and so on. I mean, it's got a bit of Jimi Hendrix on there, of course, with Foxy Lady. Indeed, no one can forget that. And there's Ugly Kid Joe on there, and so on. Uh-huh. But Wayne's World, and I watch it every now and again. It's one of those films that if you were there at the time, you kind of are very happy to revisit it. Excellent. Indeed, as Wayne or Garth might have said. Right, let us move on. So that was 1992. Party on.
Right, as everybody. Well, you said all of the lines from it. I've never made that, so it's on you now for the rest of the show to throw in your Wayne's World little
Wayne's Worldisms.
Wayne's Worldisms. So that was 1992, mate. So
yes,
I hand the baton over to you now for a year in rock. And the year that I choose is 1981. 1981.
Okay. You were so slow in delivering that. I thought it might be 1980 again, but 1981. Okay. Well, challenge accepted.
Excellent.
It is one of my favourite years, actually.
Yep.
I went to my first gig in 1981.
Did you?
Yes, actually. Funny I should say that, because one thing I wanted to talk to you about today, and I will talk about 81 next time round.
Okay. Look forward to it.
I wanted to talk to you. Yeah. In the time we got left, I wanted to talk to you about in the absence of gigs that we can go to, and we've been starved, as we know. A lot of people have been starved of gigs. In the overall scheme of things, it's not that important, of course. But
no, correct.
We haven't been to a gig for a while, as we discussed last time round, or a few times ago. So I was interested to know, because we have touched upon our early gigs.
Yeah.
What gigs stand out for you in your gig going career, young Brian?
My gig going career. So,
what was the first gig you went to? Of course, was Dio. I think we established that, didn't we?
We did. The parting of the parting of the ways. Whenever three young men stand at the front of a stage and go, "There's nobody standing here. We're all watching Queensryche," and then the cacophony of leather-clad Northern Irishmen clambering in the front and killing us all. So yes, first gig.
Sounds like something out of Game of Thrones. I just picture it.
Exactly. Well, maybe that's, it's what was it? What did they call it? The Red Wedding. Yes, it was the Antrim Forum.
Yes, inspired by the Dio gig back in 1994.
Yeah. First gig, Ronnie James Dio. Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was, but when you talk about, and I didn't appreciate it at the time. You go to your first gig, and it just hits you like a train, Matt. Nobody readies you for a PA or that sensation of Vinny Appice's bass drum hitting you at the top of your chest. For those of us who are gig goers, and I still remember it to the day, Ronnie James in the middle of the stage, and we've come down to that slow period where where in the set we're all about to sing Heaven and Hell, and all you can hear is Vinny Appice's bass drum and Jimmy Bain's thudding bass, and it's just hitting you in the chest, and you're going, that's the difference between live music and listening to a CD. You feel it. You just feel it. So I'll remember that today. I'll also remember Vivian Campbell wearing his red leather catsuit type thing and his Charvel guitars. So first gig was Dio. What about you, mate? First gig?
Well, as Iron Maiden at the University of East Anglia. For years, I thought it was Whitesnake at Hammersmith Odeon, but I got that wrong. Right down the front. I had very long hair in those days. So I was like in row 2 and my hair was in row 5. That's a slight exaggeration. But in those days, we used to cry. We didn't think anything. The older you get, the more distance and space you like to have around you.
Yeah.
It's kind of, there's a direct correlation there. But when you're young, you don't care if you're cramming in, or you don't worry about going to the bar when I was 15 then. You just kind of get on with it. And we were down the front for Maiden, me, my mate Kelvin, and my mate Richard. And one of our school teachers took us actually I think it was in the school minibus. We had these pretty cool teachers in our school, a couple of them, Mr. Robinson and Mr. Blundell, and they would occasionally take us either in their cars or in the school minibus. I'm sure there was all sorts of public liability misdemeanors going on at the time, when you think about it, from an insurance perspective, of course. But yeah, they took us there. But what I remember about those early gigs is, we do it to an extent now, and I know our mate Matt, who we talked about earlier, likes to buy a T-shirt at pretty much every gig he ever goes to.
Yes.
But do you remember back in the day, you'd buy pretty much all the merch that was available? I remember that Maiden gig, buying a T-shirt, a badge, a patch, a program, whatever they had. Yes, please, I'll have it. I wore that Iron Maiden Killers Tour T-shirt to death in that summer.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's no more. It fell apart. Such was the quality of T-shirts back in 1981, of course. That was my first.
So here's a question for you, and this is something we haven't. Can you remember what your oldest tour T-shirt that you have? I can, man. I've still got it here in the flat.
Have you? Mm-hmm. What vintage is that then, Brian?
1984. Gary Moore. When I saw Gary Moore in December for my second gig ever.
Does it still fit that T-shirt? Dare I ask?
It does. If you've got a hot water bottle, it fits the hot water bottle. It certainly wouldn't hit me.
Understood. It's what when we talk about those sort of things, we say it's shrunk in the wardrobe, which is.
I've not heard that one. But, no, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it happens. It happens, unfortunately. What's the best gig you've ever been to? Would you say
the best gig that I've ever been to? This is interesting because if you'd said what's the most memorable gig that you've ever been to, there's a couple of notable ones that I would chuck in, and it's memorable for funny reasons. I can remember, and I think I met you in London I was going to go and see King's X at the I think it was called the Forum, and it was on a Sunday night, and I didn't know that the venues opened early, like 7:00 start or something.
Yeah.
And we travelled all the way down from England to go and see King's X specifically in London, and we were sitting in a bar chatting with you, thinking, King's X will be on about 8:30 or whatever.
Oh, that's right. I remember this now.
Yeah, and I was with Keith, one of my friends, who was a massive King's X fan, and there's us going, we'll just pile in, and we got to the venue, and it's like King's X are nearly halfway through the set, and we got to see about half an hour of King's X. I'm surprised Keith spoke to me, so that was memorable. The other memorable one I remember, and then I will pick my favorite one was, I remember planning to go and see Roger Waters when The Wall was touring, and it was down in Manchester, and I didn't check the ticket. And at this time, I thought that that Roger Waters was playing in stadiums. So I drove to the Etihad Stadium, Manchester City Stadium, and I'm driving at the car park going, it's a bit quiet here. What's that? What's that in here?
Oh no.
And this is maybe about 7:00. So I just whipped the car around and I sat in the car park and checked my tickets, and it was the MEN Arena in Manchester, and I just had to just whip the car round, parked up, literally parked the car, ran in, got my ticket, and literally within, say, 5 minutes the show started. So those are two memorable gigs for me being the bad planner that I am.
Well, actually, for a minute I thought you had the wrong dates, because my cousin and her husband. This is a true story, actually. My cousin and her husband, they live in America, live in Nashville, and years ago they went to see you. It's classic kind of family story. This years ago they went to see U2, or they had tickets to see U2.
Yeah.
In somewhere like Atlanta or Memphis or somewhere like that. So they drove, and it's quite a drive. So they drove there, and they pulled up outside let's say the Atlanta or Norma Dome or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And came into the car park. And like you described, there's no one there. There was no one, expecting thousands of people, car parks, tailgates down and everything. And they found someone, and they said, so what time are U2 on? And they said, U2 was last weekend. So they sadly missed, I know, they missed the gig by, I think it was a week or a month or something, but they got their dates wrong. And needless to say, they never made that mistake again. I think they've seen U2 since then.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, it's sad, isn't it, really? I've never been that bad. I mean, I know what you mean, though, because some of those venues in London, they do, they do kind of, sometimes the gig starts early and finishes early, and then they have a club thing later on in the evening. So you got to be careful. You got to keep your eye on the timings.
And exactly, that's there's been a few times I will never, and particularly if you're traveling to London, if you're going all the way down specifically to go and see your favorite band. And then you,
I remember that.
Yeah, and you just go, oh my goodness. But London's a disaster area for me because they keep changing the venue names. You know, there's place. I think I've been to the Town and Country Club. I've been to the Astoria, but I think the Astoria has changed its name. Yeah, I've been a couple of times. So those are two memorable gigs. In terms of the best gig I ever went to was Newcastle Riverside in 1992, Matt. It was the reunion of Trapeze, or for any of our listeners in America, Trapeze. So Glenn Hughes, Mel Galley, Dave Holland all got back together and did a small club tour. I think they got back together to play at the benefit for their former manager, who was Fish's manager at the time. So I think they did a show in London, and Trapeze supported them on that. So that was a big one for me.
I can imagine.
So we arrived there about 6:30, and it was a Sunday night, and standing outside, and again, first at the door, Keith and I are there, and there was a guy having a cigarette and just hanging about, and it was a guy called Wolfie, and he went, right. And I went, okay, and he just casually said, do you fancy coming in? I says, yeah. So we came in. We saw the sound check with Trapeze. Wolfie went to see Glenn Hughes. Glenn Hughes came down off the stage, and I chatted to Glenn Hughes in the Riverside in Newcastle for about 20 minutes as a fanboy. And I was asking about Gary Moore and just asking him lots and lots of stuff about what was it like playing with Black Sabbath. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy. He was lovely. And then Dave Holland, who was the drummer, Keith's a keen drummer, and Dave Holland came down and was chatting as well. Was chatting, and at this time, everybody's starting to mill into the club. So we were in there on our own, and I remember Keith's chatting to Dave Holland about drumming stuff, and Dave Holland, Judas Priest, one of rock's known drummers, and this guy comes up in between Keith and Dave Holland and asks them for directions to the toilet. and Dave Holland, I remember Keith saying to me, they were chatting about this, and Dave Holland sort of in his very in his accent turned around, he says, "What do you think I am? Tourist information?" And this guy's asking the drummer of Trapeze, Where's the directions to the toilet? So that's the precursor before we've even.
That's not even your favourite gig. It
is my favourite gig. Okay. It's my favourite gig because I'm chatting to Glenn. Glenn in a very rock and roll way says, it's really great meeting the fans like you. Thanks. And I was talking about. I says, I'll play a song for you tonight, Brian.
Oh, sweet.
And I went. The way you're going, I'm going to hear a song for Trapeze from Glenn. So the set's going on and on and on. And my little heart, with every song that passes, I'm going, Glenn's forgotten about me. Glenn's not going to mention me. And they sang "You Are the Music, We're Just the Band," and he mentioned my name in the song, and I was floating out of that gig. And
I'm surprised.
So that's the best gig I've ever been to, because you get to meet your heroes, and I've no issue now of bands, because people are not making money off records, that you pay for meet and greets. I've done meet and greets. I've met Thin Lizzy. I've met Toto. I've met Glenn. I got no issues with that. But I have to say, there's something about going to a gig, Matt. Sometimes you've been to loads where you get backstage and you meet somebody outside. I met Yannick Gers at a Thin Lizzy gig.
Wow. And
my mate bought him a pint of Guinness because he was a big Iron Maiden fan, and Yannick was lovely. So you just, it's nice in a context of not having to pay money to meet your heroes sometimes, but I get it now that the meet and greets and you get all of this stuff. So I look back on that gig in 1992 and go, I've still got my ticket. Sadly, no merch, or I would have bought it all. But that to me is the best gig I've ever been to, bar none.
That's great.
Sorry,
I'm not surprised. That's great. That's fantastic. That is, I'm in awe of that. I mean, that's brilliant. And I know what a big Glenn Hughes fan you are.
Yeah.
And also, Trapeze are one of those bands that, kind of dissolved when Glenn Hughes went to join Deep Purple, and Mel Galley went to Whitesnake. Say Dave Holland went to Priest. So seeing them as a unit must have been, great on all levels.
It was, yeah.
Hanging out with them,
yeah.
And I can't really compete with that. I mean, frankly,
you have to. I've told you my best ever gig. You have to not. What was your best ever gig?
I used to regard U2 on the Joshua tour at Wembley Stadium in 1987 as probably the best spectacle I'd seen as a gig, as a performance. And I think maybe because it was Wembley Stadium, it was the middle weekend of my finals. I've got a degree. I don't know whether I've ever mentioned that, Brian, but I have a degree.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah, thank you very much. But anyway, such as my devotion to my degree that I decided to go and see U2 the middle weekend of my finals. Yeah. So I wrote off that Saturday, probably when I should have been revising. But I was thinking about this, and I mean, it's very difficult, I think, you could probably pick a few dud gigs you've been to, and we've been to one or two when the band we've been watching is like, there's something wrong here, and which we won't name any names.
No.
Or the PA's cut out, or whatever, or guitarist broke a string or something like that. But most of the time, you go to a gig because you want to be there. You go to a festival because you like festivals. You're not dragged kicking and screaming necessarily. So it's very difficult for me to say what was my favorite gig. I think meeting your heroes randomly is quite cool.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my wife earlier actually about the temperance movement. We went to see them in France with some friends of ours, Trevor and Bev, who live in France. And we went to the sound check, and they said to us after the gig, because we were the only people there and all the French people went home, I said, well, what? You came all the way from England to see us in France. Uh-huh. Well, you live near London, and we play London, kind of thing. We was like, well, we were here anyway, so that was cool. I suppose recently, I think you were there as well. I know you were there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see a band that kind of sparks something in you, and you think, it's a bit like being 15, 16 again, when you get that kind of like, that feeling that, I want to devote my life to this band, in one sense. And I remember when we went to see Those Damn Crows at Rambling Man a few years ago.
Yeah.
First band on the whole festival, the whole weekend. People queuing up. It's 12:30. There's no other bands on. They're opening the whole festival. The tent was packed, and they were on fire. Those Damn Crows, can't recommend them hardly enough.
Yeah.
Probably not that well known outside of Britain, but if anyone is listening anywhere in the world, check them out. Great band from Wales. So I suppose we look back at those times when you've been with your toes trodden on and your pint knocked out your hand, and someone flicking hair in your face while they're headbanging. And terrible toilets at the original kind of Monster Rock. You think, well, good times. We miss those. We miss those heady days.
We do.
I know you don't. You like a nice, cozy festival, don't you? But I mean, I've been to loads and loads of gigs, and I think most of them are pretty good. I have no complaints in general. So yeah,
when we all can get back to gigs, when you go to your gigs, get there. Go and see the support band, give them a look. You might find that it might be the new band that you want to follow. So, the things you learn over the years, don't stand next to the big tall guy, which is what I always get doing, and go and enjoy the night for what it is. Support band, the whole thing. And if you need to stay to 11:30 trying to get the set list and Steve Lukather's Plectrum from the Roadies do it.
Yeah, I mean, there are obsessive people like you. And there are normal people who just think, brilliant, let's go. Yes. Good night. Yeah, I know what you mean, but that's a good point. That's a good sentiment to end on. Yeah, yes. Support your support acts.
Exactly,
because they need you as much as you need them. Kind of thing. Which brings us on nicely to our usual regular feature of Hidden Gems.
Yes,
Hidden Gems, Brian. Have you got anything up your sleeve this week?
I do indeed. I do indeed, and having floored me at the last show with Journey. Live in Houston.
Have you watched that since?
I have. Checked it out since? I have. So you got me in a vein of AOR melodic rock, and the album that I'm going to put down is Steve Perry, as you and I have both said. 1981 was probably one of the greatest voices in American rock.
Agreed, absolutely.
Yeah, him, Lou Gramm, and somebody that I would put up there is Jimmy Jameson from Survivor. So he was the replacement singer in Survivor. And my Hidden Gem album for this show is an album called Too Hot to Sleep. It was Survivor's 7th album, released in 1988. But I would ask everybody to check it out. It's just such a strong album. It's good, melodic, and it's quite heavy. It's a heavy album. Rhythm of the City, Too Hot to Sleep, She's a Star, and there's a great Survivor do their ballads like all the great American bands. There's a track on it which is one of my favorites called Across the Miles. My hidden gem for this show is Too Hot to Sleep. Check it out, Matt. I think you'll like it.
I will. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, what I like about this is that I often hear things that I've never heard of before. And obviously I know Survivor, but probably like a lot of people, I think I have the Tiger.
Yeah.
And that's probably where I end. So I'll check it out. Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Cool.
Good selection, and I will check it out. So would you like to know mine?
What is your hit? What are you going to trump me with this show, as you always do?
Well, no, I always like to pull one out of my back pocket, as it were. And so this week, or this time, I am going to. It's not an album as such. Well, it isn't. So my hidden gem for this time is a film, and we talked earlier about 1992, and this is a film that was released in 1992, and it's not Wayne's World because we talked about it earlier. It's a film called Singles. So Singles was released in 1992. Do you remember that film?
You saw it. Well, what a great film! What a great film and great soundtrack. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. Well, you probably just don't think of things at the last minute like I did. Singles is one of those kind of Generation Xer type films that was. It's a Cameron Crowe film, which you probably know because I sense you're a fan or you're knowledgeable about this film. And it's one of those interesting films because it's set in Seattle, right at the kind of birth of. I'm making the birth symbol as we speak, the birth sign with my hands, kind of. It was set right at the birth of grunge. So you've got Matt Dillon plays a kind of. He's obviously an actor, but he's also playing a singer of a band. And in that band are various members of Pearl Jam. And also featuring in the film are people like Chris Cornell. I think Alice in Chains are in there in the background again, and so on. It's quite of its time. I mean, it's 29 years ago now.
Wow.
But it's quite a cool little film. It captures that kind of little vibe around Seattle in the early 90s, the birth of grunge. And I think you touched upon the soundtrack is pretty cool as well. It's got obviously Soundgarden, Chris Cornell's on there, Alice in Chains are on there, Pearl Jam's on there, Mother Love Bone's on there.
Yeah,
doing I think it's Hunger Strike. Anyway, I could be wrong. The Love Mongers, which is Ann and Nancy Wilson's kind of tribute band to Led Zepp. As we know, Ann and Nancy Wilson are also from Seattle, as discussed previously. So it's got all sorts of good stuff on there, really. And yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that, and I thought, you know, I for one am going to go back and watch that film and pay attention to the soundtrack. And so that's my hidden gem.
Oh, it's brilliant!
This time, do you like that?
Happy with that? Yeah, that's brilliant. I remember I didn't go and see it in the cinema. I do remember getting it on video. I bought it in video. Matt Dillon is an absolute scream with the band, as you say, with the guys from the guys from Pearl Jam. And when I always remember, there's a scene in the film where he's been interviewed, and you know, he's talking to the interviewer's talking to Cliff and saying, you know, do you see yourself as part of the Seattle scene, Cliff? And he goes, we're huge in Europe. We're huge in Europe. We've just had a record sell in Belgium.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, it's a great, and as you say, the soundtrack's superb. So for those people who watch our Facebook pages and Twitter, etc., if you can tell me on our Facebook page which other Kramer and Crow film that Jerry Cantrell stars in, and see if people can put it on our Facebook page what the answer is. But Jerry starred. He didn't star. He had a nice role in another Cameron Crowe movie. So if anybody can remember it, spot it, we'll give you props at next time's show. How's about that? But hey, what a great choice of a movie and an even better soundtrack, mate. Well done, you.
No, well, you're very welcome. Very welcome. Yeah, I like the sound of that. Actually, if anyone does know the answer to that, of course, you can always tweet us at FOR_salute, which is our Twitter handle. Anyway, on that note, Brian, I think we should call it a day. And one thing I would like to say is thank you to everyone who listens all around the world, literally, which is quite something. We've got obviously listeners in the UK, in the US, far-flung places, Sweden, as we mentioned earlier, Germany,
France.
I think I mentioned France.
Oh, did you?
Okay. Anyway, as well as India and beyond. So thank you all for listening. Keep in touch. Find us on Facebook. For those about to pod, we salute you. Or, of course, as I mentioned, on our Twitter handle, which is at FOR_salute. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time, won't we, Brian?
We will do. Take care, Matt. See everybody. Bye for now. Rock on. For those about to pod, we salute you is a Mealy Rogers media production. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.